proud to welcome Sahil.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Super excited to be here. It's my first time in COSCUP, so it's so great to see everyone today. Today we are talking about something super important when it comes to going global, which is web accessibility and internationalization and localization. And chances are, like many of you have already heard about these terms before and might have worked with these in some way, whether in your jobs, projects, or side hobbies. But if not, we're going to take things very slowly and easy today. So if you are a beginner to these, it's completely okay. So we'll also look at how these pieces fit together and why they are a key to create a truly inclusive web experiences. So yeah, let's get started. So a little bit about me. My name is Sahil and I work as a front-end tech lead for Mercari in Tokyo, Japan. Mercari, for those of you who don't know, is the largest C2C e-commerce platform in Japan. And if you use Twitter or X, you can find me at 505 Sahil or by scanning this QR code. Okay, so one of my very first introductions to accessibility was through this statement shared by the lovely Cindy Lee during her keynote on inclusive design. We are all just temporarily abled. So this simple statement highlights that at some point in our lives, we will all need our surroundings to be a little bit more accommodating than they usually are. Now, to help you all understand what I mean by this is how many of you can easily read this? I guess like people at the back are finding it a little bit difficult. How about now? If we change the language entirely, maybe someone who can read Japanese can understand and read this. How about now? I doubt no one here can read or understand this. So as many of you might have guessed, all of these are the similar statements, but either written in like hard to see colors or translated to a completely different language. And this is Hindi, which is the official language of India. So now the point I'm trying to make here is, even though most of us in this room would consider themselves as fully abled without any disability, you might have similar level of difficulty in understanding or reading this as someone who might not be able to see at all, for instance, right? So now accessibility isn't just about designing for a specific subgroup of people such as with permanent visual or motor disabilities. It's about designing for everyone, including our future selves. So this statement serves as a powerful reminder that our needs can change over time, whether it's due to injury, illness, aging, or even a situational context like a noisy environment. There will be moments when all of us require a little bit more from our surroundings. So designing with accessibility in mind ensures that we are prepared for all these moments in our own lives. So I'm pretty sure all of you here have heard various definitions of what accessibility actually means. I really love this particular definition, understanding different capabilities of your potential users and designing within those constraints. So it helps convey that knowing the users is the key to the problem. So you understand their capabilities, their constraints, and when designing or creating for them, and work towards the technology from there and not the other way around. So now W3C's Web Accessibility Initiative has broken down accessibility into 4 key principles. So number 1 of them is perceivable, which means that information shouldn't be invisible to the users. It should be accessible by one or more senses. The number 2 one is operable, which means that users should be able to interact with the interface, whether it's clicking the links, filling out the form, or navigating through menus, regardless of their abilities. And the third one is understandable. The contents and interactions should be clear and easy to grasp for everyone using your website, for instance. And finally, number 4 is robust. So everything should work consistently, even when using assistive technologies like screen readers or alternate input devices. So, for instance, a user who cannot use the physical keyboard on their computer should be able to use a digital keyboard, for instance, to work with your website. So, when discussing disability, we often limit our thinking to something that is permanent in nature, such as inability to speak or see, for instance. Or we can also call it as a medical model of disability. What often gets neglected is what I like to call as a social model of disability, which shifts our focus to society and the environment. So this isn't just about disability; is about the person's condition. It's about how well the world around them meets the need. So this is where technology, especially the digital tools like web application, play a huge role. It can either break down barriers or create completely new ones. So, in order to put things into perspective, I would like to use this example. So, for someone who cannot touch, for instance, we often only consider someone who might have only one arm. What we often knowingly or unknowingly neglect is any kind of temporary disability, such as someone recovering from an arm injury, for instance, or a situational disability, such as a new parent. And similar concept can be extended to individuals who, for instance, cannot see. We often ignore someone who might be recovering from cataract, or someone who might simply be just stepping out in the sun. So, as some of you might have experienced, in the sun, it's difficult to see your phone, right? So, if your website is not accessible enough, it's difficult to use your website. So, for someone who cannot speak, we often ignore someone with laryngitis, for instance, or a throat infection, or someone who speaks a completely foreign language, or something with a heavy accent, for instance. So, similarly, for someone who cannot hear, we often neglect someone recovering from an ear infection, for instance, or someone who might be in a situationally noisy environment, like a bartender, for instance. So, let's talk about internationalization. So, in order to understand this simply, internationalization is all about designing your application's architecture so that it can easily adapt to different cultures, regions, or languages. And since we are focusing on application development today, let's explore how we can make this happen using React JS, which is one of the most widely used JavaScript frameworks out there. So there are a few open source React libraries that can simplify adding internationalization to your applications. So these tools not only help manage translations but also various intricacies like dates, numbers, and currency formatting, for instance. So first we have React IAT Next from the IAT Next, and this is a popular library that integrates seamlessly uh, with your React applications, and it offers a flexible API for handling translations and language switching. And we also have Next IAT Next, which is the server-side rendering version or SSR version of the same library. So you can integrate it with your Next.js applications in a similar way. And lastly, on the right, you can see we have React INTL, which is from Format.js. And this helps manage not only translations, but also dates, numbers, and currencies, for instance. So I would highly recommend these libraries, which are completely open source, to try it out in your applications if you want to internationalize your applications. Now talking about localization. So while internationalization is about setting up the architecture to your to support multiple languages and regions, localization is where the real adaptation actually happens. So it's about fine-tuning the application for a specific culture, region, or language. ensuring not just translations but things like date formats, currencies, and even design elements like icons or images feel natural to your target audience. Now, localization is not always a trivial uh, thing to work with. It can become non-trivial the moment you start to go global. So I have tried to break it down into these four aspects here, which can be a good starting point when you are trying to go global. So the first one is language and content. So we have text translations under there, and ensuring the cultural relevance for any kind of text translation is also very important. And secondly, on the right, you can see we have design and user interface. So it can mean text expansions, for instance, when you are supporting, for example, right to left, or what we call RTL in your application, and ensuring icons and visual actually make sense for different cultures. And on the bottom left, you can see we have regional standards, which means like date and time formats, currency conversions, or measurement unit can change depending on the region and countries. And lastly, we have support and compliance, which means your customer support for your application or service needs to change and adapt to different regions when you start to go global. And also, data and privacy laws also change depending on the region for your application. So now looking more into text translation. So there are a bunch of ways you can maintain the translations in your web applications. A common approach is to use a JSON key value pair. Uh, so these keep things structured and easy to maintain when you're working with translation in a large code base, for instance. So there are some amazing translation management systems that can also be utilized to make these translations available in your application. So they have open source solutions also, and these are Phrase and Localize. So I have worked very closely with Phrase also, and it's very easy to use in your application. So I would highly recommend you to look into these if you're interested. They also provide CI/CD solutions, so you can integrate it with your CI pipelines as you need it to be. Uh, Now there are different ways to integrate these translations into the React code base. As we discussed earlier, we have libraries like IAT Next that can make the process easier. But one of the traditional approaches is to use a custom context provider. Like you can see here, we have the translation context, which basically wraps around your application and exposes the use translate function. And so this allows you to easily access translations within the components or pages of your application. And you can simply call the use translate function and pass in the locale key in order to get the translation for that particular key. Now talking about another important aspect of localization, we have date and time formats. So I don't know about you, but I find it really challenging to work with date and times in JavaScript. Uh, so for instance, like this is how dates are generally written in Japan and also in Taiwan, I believe. But this is how it's written in India, which is very different and could be confusing if your application is not properly localized. And this is how it's written in the US. So yeah, so you can see basically how this can be quite confusing to users if your application is not being correctly localized depending on the region where it's being used. So dates are, like I said, really hard to work with, especially in JavaScript. Again, we have some open source libraries that can be used to simplify this. We have the native JavaScript API called JSINTL that can be used. But if you're looking for more utility-based solutions, we have Luxon and DateFNS also, which are completely open source and can be used for localizing dates. So please check them out if you're interested. Next up is bidirectionality. This is again one of the aspects that I see most of websites lacking in terms of accessibility. So now there are many languages that out there which are read from left to right, such as English or Japanese, as we are aware. But whereas some languages are read from right to left, or what we call RTL. So Arabic is one of such language, and it's quite important that the UI interface of your web applications can accommodate for that change. So as you can see here on the right, how the layout of the application changes when the language is right to left. So now there are a couple of handy things that can be done to achieve this, and the first and the basic one, I think some of us here should be familiar with, is the HTML dir attribute. So this will flip any of the non-direction specific content in your layout, such as texts or grids. So we also can programmatically flip any of direction specific CSS, such as padding left or margin right. And we have these amazing utility libraries by Casey Dode's RTL CSS JS, which can be used, and we have RTL CSS, which is a CSS based solution. So please check them out if you're interested. So let's talk about something super interesting. So talking about Disney, there's a fascinating detail in the Inside Out movie. I'm not sure like if you have watched this movie, but in one of the scenes, Riley, which is the character's name, doesn't like the vegetable that is offered to her. So in the US version of the movie, which is on your left, the vegetable is broccoli, which many of the American kids often tend to dislike. But in the Japanese version, the vegetable is changed to bell peppers, because in Japan, kids generally don't like bell peppers. So this is a small change, which is a brilliant example of localization, adapting your content to align with the region or the country in which you are providing the experience to. So this is simple yet powerful way to ensure a story actually connects with the audience or the users using your service. Now here I have a small component named dog component, so which is rendering this image of a dog playing in the park. Can anyone spot what could be improved with this component in terms of accessibility? The alt tag, right? Yeah, correct. So the alt text of the image is not correctly localized. So for when a person is using the screen reader, for example, in a country that don't understand English, so it won't be able to understand the image properly. So this is a tiny aspect where I see these two critical concepts of accessibility and internationalization actually merging together. So now both internationalization and accessibility rely on separation of concerns. However, adapting to one specific region through internationalization or ensuring accessibility on its own is not always enough. So to create a truly inclusive experience, we need to start thinking of the intersection of both these concepts. For example, consider an application primarily designed for Taiwan, trying to expand globally. The needs of an elderly user in Taiwan would be completely different from the needs of a blind user in Japan or in India, for instance, right? So the intersection of accessibility and internationalization can feel complicated, and like I said before, it can become really non-trivial problem to solve. But this where I believe analyzing the key scenarios play an important role. So as we all know, users need actually differ widely across demographics, and understanding how they intersect can drastically change the number and type of scenarios you need to consider. So the bottom right quadrant is the intersection, which I visualized using this quadrant here. So it's easy to get overwhelmed with the number of scenarios that can be generated once we start to think about the intersection, but it's important to stay focused on the most critical and the key scenarios in your applications. For example, if you have an e-commerce service, I think the most important scenarios could be users are able to sign up to your service, or users are able to search for products in your service, user is able to purchase the product in your service. So this is how, like, I believe we can ensure that you are addressing the most important areas first while building a foundation for a broader inclusivity. Yeah, that will be all from my side. Thank you, everyone.